Hey guys, this is going to be my first time doing any kind of live stream on this particular subject. So, the Nick Reiner case had some developments today. I went over that briefly this afternoon in a short video, but then there was some other stuff that came up throughout the day. There's a whole press conference that hadn't come up yet by the time I had published that. So I just wanted to run through some of that with you guys. Nick is, as most people know, accused of murdering his parents, Rob Reiner and Michele Reiner. People have largely speculated that he will try to use some kind of insanity plea, and today just kind of heightened those speculations. His defense attorney, Alan Jackson, actually withdrew. And while he's bound by certain, rules so that he can't explain too much about why he withdrew, the overarching conclusion that a lot of people have come to is that it was because of financial reasons, like maybe the family, the surviving siblings, etc., didn't want to fund his defense after he allegedly murdered their parents. So there was some conversation about that. Also, Alan Jackson, very loudly and confidently declared that Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder based on the, state laws of California. And so we're going to talk about that. I have a lot of thoughts about the insanity plea in general. And so that's something that I wanted to talk about and give perspective to this kind of thing, because that is, like I said, the overarching speculation that people are kind of running with right now is that it will be some kind of insanity plea, and that Alan was sort of saying that he is definitely not guilty based on that, like the state laws around mental health and competency and insanity plea and all that kind of thing. So first thing I want to do is run through some background on somebody from Law and Crime was actually there present in the courtroom and had some details that we haven't been able to see. So I want you guys to see that. And then we'll take a look at the actual press conference. And we'll go from there as far as talking about whether or not the insanity plea would be appropriate, what it would take to be successful in that kind of a defense. It's very, very difficult to successfully plead insanity, you know what I mean? So we'll talk a little bit about that and why I personally feel like I feel like it's unlikely, even if somebody is severely mentally ill, even if you are schizophrenic and floridly psychotic at the time of a crime, there is such a high bar to be cleared for a crime like this based on your mental health and your sanity, I guess, competency, that I feel like it's unlikely. I've heard a lot of opinions about Alan Jackson himself today, which I didn't actually know too much about Alan Jackson. So I think that because I didn't watch the Karen Reed trial actually too closely at all, I knew the overarching, what was going on, and I knew what happened in the end, but I actually don't know too much about Alan Jackson at all. So that kind of gives me more of a removed perspective. So I don't really know how to feel about the statement he made as far as is this the type of thing he normally does? I'm not sure. So if you guys want to weigh in on that and give me some more perspective into what the kind of things he usually does and how he usually runs his defense for his clients, that kind of thing, feel free to do so, because I'm learning still. And I'm not a lawyer, remember that. So also, don't take anything that we say in this video as medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I worked as a psychiatric evaluator in the emergency room. I worked with a lot of jail inmates who were brought to the hospital and helped the ER physicians determine whether or not they needed to be hospitalized, and may or may not have an issue with competency before standing trial. But, I'm not a doctor, like I said. I don't prescribe medications. I'm not someone's therapist, anything like that. So Alan Jackson is a legend. I hear that a lot, and then I hear a lot of opposite opinions. So I've been hearing totally opposite things today, and I'm just the truth is I just have no idea. I have no opinion on Alan Jackson, which I think is probably helpful because it's not going to play that much of a factor in my decision, or my opinion on the matter. So let me first pull this up for you guys. So somebody from Law and Crime, like I said, was in the courtroom and said that Nick Reiner was seen kind of giggling and acting in a way that he wasn't too stressed out, but then it sounded like he was then when the actual hearing started stressed out. So people have speculated a lot about his mental health because yesterday in the jail, he was taken off of suicide watch. So taken off of suicide watch doesn't mean there's necessarily no mental health stuff going on there. He is still, based on reports, being held in high observation housing, which if you aren't familiar with like psych hospitals and how that works and just specific observations, high observation housing is almost like a psych hospital within the jail. Not quite though. Things are going to vary based on where you are, but he's under heightened observation, so he's being watched closely and frequently, and we'll see how that goes. So, opposite opinions come from the mentally infirm. Jesus. All right, guys. Let me pull this up first. I want to show you what they were saying about how Neidigh Reiner appeared in the courtroom and his kind of demeanor, and it seems to have shifted at some point, so we'll talk about that a little bit. Let's pull that up. Okay. And at some point, I'll pause and skip ahead because I just want to listen to some of this and then we won't watch the whole video. It's going to be some short clips. Here we go.
Hi, on behalf of
and guys in the chat who are watching this live, please let me know if you can hear it because you should be able to, but let me know. Just confirm for me.
Jackson Quinn, and with Mr. Reiner's understanding and consent, would ask to withdraw his counsel of record based on the conversation that we've had in chambers and the explanation we provided to the court in chambers. We feel that we have no choice at this juncture but to withdraw his counsel and ask to be relieved. The Public Defender's Office has been notified. We've had conversations with them. They're here, they're staffed, they're ready to take over. My understanding is they're ready for the appointment immediately, forthwith.
Good morning, Your Honor. Kimberly Green from the Public Defender's Office. That is correct.
So the court will is, and so.
Okay, so I just wanted to show that kind of official moment there where Alan Jackson, representing his law firm, withdrew as counsel for Neidigh Reiner, and then I think her name is Kimberly Green. I'm pretty sure the public defender takes over. So there's nothing like too crazy here. I just kind of wanted to take a look at that. And then here's where there's some insight from Law and Crime and their correspondent who was in the courtroom. Skip over to, I have a second screen now in case you guys didn't know. So I have some notes over here that I can reference. Let's go over to 1339 so we're not looking too much at this, which a lot of it just went into discovery and transfer of information and that kind of thing. So we don't really need to watch that right now. All right.
Still remains at no bail.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And while all of that was unfolding inside the courtroom, there were things that you wouldn't catch just by listening to the feed. Because here at Law and Crime, we had a member of our team actually there on the ground. And they tell us that Neidigh Reiner didn't appear surprised by what was happening. Before the hearing even started, he was actually seen chatting and laughing with deputies. His head was shaved. He had a bit of a 5 o'clock shadow. He was frankly looking worn down, but not visibly shaken. His brother and sister were not in the gallery today. Alan Jackson.
And just looking at this photo, I had not seen his siblings before. He and his brother look so much alike, which is crazy. I know that's not really relevant to what we're talking about. It's just an observation. I was like, oh my God, they really look alike.
Jackson, meanwhile, he was pacing, crossing his arms. He was on his phone. He clearly tense from what our person in the courtroom could see. Now, even before he asked to speak with the judge, he just seemed to be very tense in this moment. Now, once the hearing wrapped, Jackson did not leave quietly. He walked straight out of the courtroom, past the cameras, and stepped up to the microphones. And that's where this case took yet another turn. Once outside the courthouse, Alan Jackson, he didn't dodge cameras. He stepped up right to the microphones, and before anyone could even ask a question, he made one thing clear. This wasn't a strategic exit, he says. It wasn't something that he wanted.
I had to withdraw as...
So I want to watch the whole press conference before I give my thoughts on that and the potential insanity plea we have going on here. But we have a different video. This one's from, let's see, Law and Crime Trials, which is also related to Law and Crime, that has the whole thing. It's less than 3 minutes long. It's not like a terribly long press conference. But the reason I chose this video is that it also has some statements from the Public Defender's Office. And I wanted to hear what they had to say too. So that might be interesting. So let me switch this out and we'll get going on that. Give me 1 second to get a sip of Okay, so the title of this video is Alan Jackson screams that Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. And I'm going to be honest, I think screams is an extremely strong word, okay? Because if you watch this, it's like he's saying it very confidently and he's declaring it, but he's not screaming. So just to be clear, I think screams is a little bit of an overreach, but he was very, very confident and very forward. So let's hear what he had to say here, and then we'll stop and comment on that, and then we'll look at what the public defender's office had to say. So,
Good morning. As you know, my name is Alan Jackson. This morning, I had to withdraw as Nick Reiner's counsel. Circumstances beyond our control, but more importantly, circumstances beyond Nick's control, have dictated that, sadly, it's made it impossible for us to continue our representation of Nick. I'm legally and I'm ethically prohibited from explaining all the reasons why. I know that's a question on everybody's mind. We expect the public defender to step in. They've already been appointed and very capably protect Nick Reiner's interests as he moves forward through the system.
So just again, I want to point out, I don't know much about Alan Jackson because I didn't follow the Karen Reed trial very closely. And that's where most of the people who made comments on my content know him from. So what he's about to say and what he said so far, I don't know if this is typical for him. I don't know if this is typical for like a regular defense attorney to come out and say this after they withdraw from a case. So you guys in the chat, if you've ever seen anything like this, let me know. I would love some more input on that. Personally, I've never seen anything like it before, so I don't know how normal it is for him to go out like this on a limb as he's withdrawing to say something so confidently. So let's put it this way.
But be clear, be very, very clear about this. My team and I remain deeply, deeply committed to Nick Reiner and to his best interests. In fact, we know, we're not just convinced, we know that the legal process will reveal the true facts of the circumstances surrounding this case, Nick's case. You know, a lot's been printed of late over the last 3 weeks. A lot has been printed about Nick, printed about his family, printed about the circumstances. Speculation is in print. On December 15th, in the early morning hours, I was in New York at the time, and I got a call. Me and my team, we dropped everything. And for the last 3 weeks, we have devoted literally every waking hour to protecting Nick and his interests. We've investigated this matter top to bottom, back to front. What we've learned, and you can take this to the bank, is that pursuant to the laws of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Print that. Print that.
So that was a very confident and forward statement. Like I said, with the title of this video by Law and Crime Trials, was he screaming? No, but that was a very confident statement. So what I'm wondering is, like, how often is it that an attorney who's withdrawing from a case like this would say something this confidently? And I would love to ask Omar or some other attorney who has some more insight into that, if that's normally the case. And I know people have said that Alan Jackson in particular is usually this kind of forward and strong-willed in his statements. And so I don't know that because I don't know much about Alan Jackson, but I know that's what I've heard. So you guys will have to let me know what you think. But he's very adamant that Nick is not guilty of these murders. And from his wording, the wording that he used, it sounds like based on the laws of California, right? So it does sound like the, highly speculated insanity defense is the most likely scenario that we're looking at here. He's probably thinking based on those rules that Nick would be considered not guilty by reason of insanity. However, I have my own thoughts about that and how difficult that is. And I think I gave an example recently in a video when I was talking about this case where this guy, his name is Richard Chase, who was also accused of murder in the state of California. It was a state murder case, to the best of my knowledge. They called him the vampire or the Dracula of Sacramento. He had, a disorder that, caused him to have psychosis and like very strong delusions that he had to murder his victims, to take and drain their blood. He mutilated and ate them, consumed their parts, like disgusting, heinous, crazy ass stuff. And I know that to some is going to be like, ew, oh my God, why would you say that? And I'm just trying to demonstrate a point about how high the standard is and how crazy it is. And mind you, I will say this was decades and decades ago, but he did all that, believed that he had to consume the blood of his victims in order to sustain his own life. He thought that his blood was turning to powder. He thought that he had to do that in order to continue living. And when he faced the jury at trial, he was still found guilty. His insanity plea did not work, because the thing is, even if you're schizophrenic, even if you have delusional disorder, even if you have some kind of psychosis or thought disorder, the thing is, did you know in that moment that murder was illegal, that murder was wrong? And Richard Chase knew, even though he believed he was doing it to like save his life in that moment, he knew that murder was illegal. He knew it was illegal to kill and consume his victims. He knew that it was wrong. And this is in the state of California, which is why I feel like that's such a good example. But the burden is so high. So another example of someone that successfully used an insanity plea, there was this lady in Texas who had killed her children. She believed God was telling her to do so. And because her delusions ran so deep, it was like her perception of right and wrong and illegal versus legal was so distorted that she was found not guilty. So it really depends on your mindset, A, at the very moment of the crime, and B, whether or not, despite your delusions, hallucinations, whatever, do you still understand? Do you have the capacity to understand that what you're doing is illegal, is wrong? Did the hallucinations, the delusions, etc., did they distort your perception so much that you could not possibly understand that the act of killing your parents was the wrong thing to do, that it was illegal, that it could possibly lead to you spending the rest of your life in prison or getting you the death penalty? So it is extremely difficult to successfully use the insanity plea. I personally believe that it's a good thing that it's this difficult, because if it wasn't, it would lead to, more widespread malingering, which is faking symptoms, intentionally faking symptoms in order to achieve a desired outcome or to, achieve material gain, which is something I saw a lot when I worked in the hospital. When I worked in the ER, we would have a lot of recurrent patients who malingered in order to get a certain outcome. If you, do that and escape consequences or get what you want based on malingering or based on, being excused for your mental illness, for your actions, that creates a bigger danger for the public at large. So then we have to kind of consider, what does the most good for the most people? And I believe the laws we have in place and the degree of difficulty we have in place for successfully using an insanity plea is the best thing to do. And I'm not saying that Nick won't meet that standard. I can't possibly say that. No one can possibly say that, because as much public information as we have, given the high profile nature of this crime, nobody knows for sure what exactly happened in that moment that his parents were murdered, and nobody knows for sure what his mental state was. I'm saying it's unlikely. I'm not saying it was impossible. It's, you know, if you hear someone online, especially someone who says they're a psychologist or a doctor, and I say this because unfortunately there are a lot of predatory presences online these days. If you hear a doctor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, an MD, anybody saying, they for sure know there's no way that Neidigh Reiner would meet the burden for, you know, like not guilty by reason of insanity. They're not really representing the information they're giving you in a truthful manner. I think they're overdoing it. So none of us can say for sure. I would say it is highly unlikely based on the information that we have. That's the best answer I can give you. But I want to listen to this a little bit more and listen to what the defense attorneys have to say. JT, thank you for the $2. Andrea Yates, lady from Texas. Yes, thank you very much. I did another video where I talked about Andrea Yates, and I talked about Richard Chase, and I talked about the son of Sam and the insanity pleas in those situations. But let's move on a little bit so that I'm not taking too much of your time, and we can listen to the rest of this press conference.
We wish him the very, very best moving forward. And that's all I have today.
Like I said, he didn't have too much more to say, but the public defender's office, I want to hear what they had to say here. I skimmed over it a little bit earlier, but I haven't heard the whole thing. So let's do that. But let's see, hang on. I think this is where they start talking. Let me make sure. I have to kind of stand there for a minute while they get all the mics and stuff set up. It's what I will say about this statement that Alan Jackson made, and again, I don't know Alan Jackson. I don't know how typical this is for him. I hope that it didn't hurt the family. I hope that his confident display here did not hurt the family. And I don't know. There's no way for me to know that it hurt the family or didn't. And there's no way for anyone to really know because the family's been tight-lipped about this. They asked that we speculate with compassion, and I'm trying to do that. I don't want to, you know, like say horrible, awful things about their family member, Nick, even though this was a tragedy that affected more of their family members. He allegedly took the lives of some of their parents. It's awful. So I don't want to speculate too much on that. I don't want to say horrible things about really anyone involved in this scenario because there's so much we don't know. I would say that I am very concerned that coming out with a statement like that would be painful to the people who are, you know, surviving family members of Rob and Michele. I think that, and this is kind of a personal anecdote here, but as I get older, you know, my parents were a little bit, they weren't like old when they had me, but they're older. So they're still older now. I think every now and then about what it'll be like the day that I lose my parents. And I'm like, this is so awful. And that's one of my biggest fears is like the day that I finally lose my parents. And it's going to happen. Everybody dies someday. You know what I mean? And my dad's up in his mid-70s now. So like they have some time. It's not like my parents are going to die tomorrow, but I still worry about it. I worry. It stresses me out. I feel sad when I think about it. As I get older and older, I'm just like, every now and then I like spontaneously feel so sad about that. And so I can't imagine being a family who just had, you know, Rob and Michele, they were murdered brutally and suddenly and unexpectedly. I can't imagine being a part of that family. So my only thing with Alan Jackson making that statement is I hope it didn't hurt that family. I hope it didn't break their hearts more than they're already broken. And I can't tell you if it did or not. But my immediate thought was, wow, I really, really, really hope that nobody heard that and thought, that just breaks my heart even more. You know what I mean? So losing parents is something that a lot of, or most people have to go through at some point, I'm sure. But that's my only concern there. Let's hear what the public defender had to say, and I'll stop running my mouth for a second. So,
Sir, Ricardo Garcia, Los Angeles County Public Defender. I'm here with Kimberly Green, the Deputy Public Defender assigned to the Reiner case. I want to say that on behalf of the entire Public Defender's Office, we are incredibly sorry and understand the pain and suffering that the Reiner family is going through at this time, as well as the entire Los Angeles community. The Public Defender's Office and the entire staff, our hearts at this time go out to the entire family. We hope that the community will also understand that this is a challenging time for the entire legal process. We ask for your patience, your understanding as we navigate this process through the legal system, and that we will be available as we can be to address your questions when appropriate. Thank you. We learned, I believe last night or yesterday, that we were being substituted in. I'm going to let Ms. Green answer that.
Briefly this morning, but we haven't had a chance to discuss any. I spoke to Mr. Reiner briefly this morning. He was understanding that there was going to be a change in counsel. We haven't had any in-depth conversations. I have not. We'll discuss that with Mr. Reiner and see how to proceed. Not at all. It's not uncommon for private counsel to turn over cases to us, so no, nothing about that would complicate the situation. I have talked to him for only 30 minutes. I have no idea. I only spoke to Mr. Reiner for about 30 seconds this morning. I have no comment about it. I have not. We've had no contact with the family. I don't think they were aware that this was going on until this morning.
At this point in time, Ms. Green will look into the case. We'll speak with Mr. Reiner. And if you have any further questions, reach out to our media team once we have more information ourselves. This just happened today, and my understanding is he was aware of it. Ms. Green spoke with him, as you heard. And as soon as we have more information that we can share, we will share it.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
Thank you. You can direct any further questions to our media.
Okay. So, public defender said that Nick knew this was coming, right? And so they talked to him, but it sounds like very briefly. She said, Kimberly Green, who's actually the attorney assigned to him, said, spoke to him for about 30 seconds, right? So he doesn't know much about them or how they feel about his case or their strategy moving forward. There's so much up in the air. He hasn't even been arraigned yet. Today was supposed to be his arraignment. It had been postponed to today, and then Alan had to withdraw. I say had to because Alan Jackson said he had no choice. I don't know exactly what that means. Nobody knows exactly what that means. You know, I've seen some speculation. The, most likely scenario that I've seen floating around online is financial. I cannot imagine being one of the siblings of Nick, who, especially the one that discovered Rob and Michele dead in their house, trying to decide if they would cover legal fees, if they would allow the estate or whatever, not even the estate, I don't know, but allow the family in general to cover legal fees for the person who supposedly, I say supposedly, what I mean is allegedly killed their parents. Like, so this is imagine it's your brother or your sister, your parents are dead, and your brother or sister supposedly did it. So I can't imagine making a decision about covering legal fees, especially if your sibling has a history of schizophrenia, has a history of drug abuse, that kind of thing. There's like so many things that would go through your mind too. And I'm just saying, like, if you come home and discover something like that, and then you learn that your sibling did it, right? Someone you're closest to in this world did it. What are you supposed to think? There's going to be so many different things going through the minds of the family as they're going through the stages of grief. Whether or not they think he did it in the end, ultimately, like, they're still going through grief right now. So even any information that's given to them right now, there's going to be so many ways their brains could process, interpret these things. It's going to happen on different timelines for each person. They're going to have to decide as a family unit, like, do we pay for his defense at this point, for a private defense, when he allegedly killed our parents or, whatever relation they were to the family members? It's just so sad. And I know firsthand from somebody that I was friends with that family can sometimes know, you kind of know in your gut that something happened that was horrible and tragic, and somebody that they love did the terrible thing that they're being accused of, but they can hear all the facts and still kind of come up with different ways for why that person wasn't responsible for that or wasn't guilty. Like, and I'm not saying for sure this is what's going on. I'm just trying to talk about the possibilities. I want to be very clear. I have no special insight into the Reiner situation. So I can't tell you how their family's feeling exactly, but I will say that a lot of people who are families of victims, when it comes to crimes like this, where there's family violence, family conflict, they might come up with a lot of different reasons in their head as to why it's not the fault of their other loved one for hurting or killing their loved ones. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many kind of ways that our brains, no matter how smart you are, no matter how good you are, it does not matter. You could be a freaking genius, and trauma will do this to you, where your brain will be doing backflips to try to explain to yourself how, no, there's no way my brother is guilty of this. I just went through this horrible tragedy where I lost my parents. There's no way my brother's guilty of this, even if all evidence had pointed to the contrary. So it's a possibility that that could have been going on. There's also a possibility that they knew right away, and where they were like, oh my God, I know you did this, and you've been through so much, and they gave you every chance in the world to do better, and you are totally responsible for this, and we want nothing to do with you, so we're not going to pay for this. It's just, there's just so much that could be going on through those families' minds. And that's why when Alan Jackson made that statement, my first reaction wasn't, oh, then he's totally not guilty. My first reaction was, wow, I really hope the family isn't hurt by this statement. So it's just really sad all around. And as someone who is pretty removed from all this stuff, and the fact that I don't know anything about Alan Jackson really, and I, don't want to speculate too much about the family's feelings, but I want to be respectful, because I know in one of the only statements they made was they asked for compassion in people's speculations. I want to honor that. So as somebody who's, got that in mind, I just wanted to kind of give my thoughts on that in the best way that I could, and hope that other people will as well respect the people involved as this case progresses, as stuff like this continues to happen. Even if somebody like Alan Jackson comes out and says not guilty, the most important people in the scenario to me are his family members, who are trying to deal with the fact that their brother or, nephew, cousin, whatever, may have murdered his parents, may have taken away someone that they loved, depended on, relied on, cared for. That's the most important thing, in my opinion. So hopefully, I know that I have a little bit of the ADD, so sometimes I don't get my thoughts across super well, but I hope that makes sense to you guys. And just everybody let me know what you think. If you have more insight into the situation, if you followed Alan Jackson, if you followed Neidigh Reiner before, let me know what you think. I mean, it's never a bad thing to discuss, as long as you aren't badgering or harassing the family, as long as you're not doing anything irresponsible that might hurt them. I think it's a good thing to have these conversations, especially when it comes to how our court system serves the public, how it serves the taxpayers, and what they decide to do moving forward is I think everybody has kind of a little bit of a vested interest in that, right? And people will say, well, you're not a lawyer, you're not a doctor. Well, I do have my experience working with psych patients who have done, crimes like this. And I do know how those outcomes usually turn out and why. I know when an insanity plea is usually appropriate. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell you what's going to work and what's not. I'm not a doctor, so I can't give you a total diagnosis or tell you what medication someone should be on. But I have my experience, and also I'm a member of the public who knows that the courts are supposed to serve us, because we, the taxpayers, have a vested interest in how they proceed with things. So this is a horrible tragedy, but it is important to watch how it plays out. So I would like to continue doing that. But as for now, I'm going to take off, probably go to bed in a little bit and just get a little bit of rest. This is a new case to me still, but hopefully you guys, got some insight and enjoyed it. And as soon as I end this stream, let's see if we can redirect to somebody who might need the redirect. How about that? I like to do nice things for other streamers if I can. So let's see who's streaming right now that I could redirect to. Oh, you go over to my buddy Expert. How about that? Okay. Now, guys, a reminder, if I redirect you to a stream and you don't like the subject of the stream, this is not an endorsement of anything because I have no idea what's going on in that stream. I'm just trying to be nice to other people who need viewers. You know what I mean? So it's good to help each other out in the community. So, and Expert is my friend. So you guys go over there and say hi to him. Tell him Lauren sent you. And then if you don't want to watch, don't. If you want to watch, awesome. So that's all I got for now. Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you all soon. Okay. I'll be back tomorrow. Bye.